Keith, Quentin, Keith, pleasure to be speaking with you both. I'll
Nice
throw it
to
to
meet
Keith
you.
first. Two-parter. How are you, and how does it feel to be answering the same questions over and over and over again today?
I'm doing good and I'm loving it because this is my first time in production and I'm loving it.
Got it. Quentin, same thing at you. How are you? Same questions over and over again. Are you bored, or it's just a pleasure to be talking to people?
I love talking, and I can repeat the same thing. Let me tell you how Keith and I met.
Sure.
I was working on a TV show called Comedy Invasion, and Keith is one of the star of one of the episodes. And together
Oh
we
yeah.
won the Canadian Screen Awards, the 2024 Canadian Screen Award for Best Comedy Special. So this is the actual award.
Hmm.
And so as we finished Comedy Invasion, Keith was asking me, "Do you want to come on the rest and see what it's like?" And then I said, "Sure." And I haven't been to a rest since I was 17. I was in Montreal going to a powwow. So
Hmm.
he was driving me around the rest, showing me different reservations around Canada and Vancouver. And then I thought, why don't we do something kind of like, comedy invasion, like, something like Indigenous stand-up comedy on the reservation, kind of like, and then Rest Comedy came about, and then it got greenlit into development by a network, and then it got dropped from production, and we decided to make it as a feature film using the
Hmm.
same comics that we've cast in the TV series.
Sure. I believe I did some coverage of Invasion. I interviewed Yumi, I think two or three of the comics on
Oh,
that. And
yeah.
and
Yes,
hey,
I do.
I'm supporting the cause right here. But Keith, thrown over to you. Is it fair to call this a Canadian movie? And I ask for a good reason.
Yeah, I guess. Like I said, this is my first time, so I'm not too sure on it. But yeah, I would be proud to give it a Canadian movie. Yeah.
I'm seeing the .ca domains on some of the sites and all that. And the reason I mention that is because as grown up as a New Yorker, you learn that almost all your favorite comics and comedy writers and show creators are Canadian, Lauren Michaels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you're not really raised to think about the native end of Canada until you're much older, let alone the Canadian native side of things, until you watch Letterkenny and that kind of a thing. So, Keith, when did you kind of realize that there was a strong comedy scene for natives?
Well, I've been doing it since 2014. Before then, I only knew one native comic,
Hmm.
and I didn't really see many out there. Then again, I was only going to two comedy clubs.
Hmm.
It's the non-big comedy clubs that you would see a native at. And then I started seeing others, and then my friends were pressuring me to get into it. So we produced a show on our reserve, and people kept saying, "When are you gonna do another one?" And so my wife and I started going to all these comedy shows, whether they're at coffee houses, a bar, a hall, and starting to get to know these other native comedians. And I was like, "Wow, there's some out here, but you don't see them um, very often."
Right.
So I started Bubba's Comedy, and then just bringing other natives on from around the Lower Mainland here in Vancouver, and then started doing Bubba's Comedy, and then going into Res University, and Res University was where non-natives get to learn about native life
Right.
through through stories and jokes. And then when I came across Quentin, or Quentin came across my stuff and asked me and to be on Comedy Invasion and to learn about some of our history through jokes.
Right. Well,
And
I've
then, oh,
I
sorry. And then it opened. I mean, I met Janelle Niles through a mutual comedian. And then I started to get to learn more about other Native comedians up here.
So before I ask another thing to Quentin, a follow-up question about Vancouver. Most of my favorite albums, I shouldn't say most, a lot of my favorite albums of all time were recorded in Vancouver by American artists. Are you aware of that? For example, that Metallica, Motley Crue, David Lee Roth, etc. were all recording in Vancouver?
Yes, yeah, it's little. Mountain Studios.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a lot of in the 80s especially. Um, when Metallica came here in 91, I was 19. I didn't know they were up here. I would have been stalking them. Like, because I've seen Metallica 30 times, so I'm a huge fan of them. And yes, it is a really great city for entertainment.
I thought it'd be safe to ask you that because the Bubba's shirt that you're wearing has the Metallica lettering. Uh, or we won't say that if we don't want to get sued for copyright or trademark infringement. So it's like Metallica. But anyway, Quentin, uh, congratulations on this film. And again, it's not your first comedy related special or film. Are you now pigeonholed to comedy? You think you're going to do a lot more comedy related projects based on the success of this and Invasion?
You know what? It's funny. I felt like I have two careers. I started out making independent features, and that was back in 1996. A movie called Shopping for Fangs with my buddy Justin Lin that had gone to Toronto Film Festival in 97. So, and I've been making these kind of Asian American queer kind of like indie features. And then somehow accidentally I was talking to a friend in maybe 2015, 16. And I
Hmm.
was saying like, hey, I want to do this Asian American comedy show. About we do comedy invasion. And so because we have so many Asian American comics friends, and we put it together. And since then, I've just been nonstop doing comedy special. And one thing I like about comedy special is that it's I kind of like art that is very raw,
Hmm.
and stand-up comedy is kind of like that. You can't really control. It's almost like making a documentary. You can't really control what the artist brings in, but then you do get to kind of like finesse that set in post-production a little bit, but still you're presenting something that is very kind of like very organically artistic, and that's something I kind of like really enjoy doing. Besides making films, because sometimes you make you develop a feature film that you write the script for 2 years and then go into development for another couple of years, and eventually 10 years down the line and you make it, it's not really the same product that you started off making. It's just
Right.
so much kind of like so many hands going into this kind of like thing. And I think with doing stand-up comedy, you can just see that kind of raw energy that turns into a product, and that's really satisfying for me as a filmmaker.
So the follow up to that, and I'll also ask Keith this. Do you know what's next? Are we allowed to know what's next? Or do we have to wait for the Hollywood Reporter or Variety or some kind of embargo to lift?
Yes. I mean, we're definitely trying to make more another. We're trying to turn Res Comedy into a TV series still, and I'm trying to make the second season of Comedy Invasion.
Hmm.
But I'm also making a feature film called The Way You Dance, and I'm just putting it together as a dance movie, also set in BC in Langley. So.
Wow. Okay. British Columbia is doing well. Keith, same thing for you. Are we allowed to know what's next? Stand up and of course booking shows, etc. But are there any projects that aren't a secret?
Well, we do Res Comedy live in Vancouver monthly.
Hmm.
We're working with Underground Comedy Club. They allow us to have Res Comedy there at the end of the month. We're also working with Lana Lou's restaurant. They let us have Res Comedy there. It's just not Indigenous comedians. I do bring up other ethnicity and races to do with our Truth and Reconciliation, to
Right.
work together. I mean, end of the day, if we all cut our finger and put our blood in a bowl, whose blood's whose? We're all the same. We're just different. What do you call the skin? Just some are darker than others, but
Right.
we're all funny. We all have stories of our heritage, of our traditions and everything. And I love to listen to we talked about music,
Mhm.
and I like watching behind the music
Yeah.
of my classic rock, especially Metallica, but I also like watching behind the music of bands I don't like, because then I learn about them and go, oh, that's pretty cool. I was never an Elvis fan, but when I went to Graceland, I was like, oh my God, that was so awesome. You
Yeah.
know, live entertainment is amazing.
Live entertainment is amazing. You documented that with this film. Quentin, I hope you take it to series as is planned, and really looking forward to the future projects from both of you. Congratulations on breaking stereotypes while making people laugh.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darren.
Paltrocast.